Heather Leavell Keaton, 7 years on death row in the state of Alabama. Leavell Keaton was charged and convicted for the murder of her two stepchildren, 3-year-old Chase DeBlas and 4-year-old Natalie DeBlas in 2010. She committed these crimes together with her partner John DeBlas, who was the father of the kids. Prosecutors claim that Natalie was duct taped, put in a suitcase, and left in a closet for 12 hours before she choked to death in March 2010. Later, her body was discarded close to Citronelle in a wooded area. Chase was strapped to a broom handle and left in the corner of the couple's bedroom overnight in June 2010, where he suffocated to death. His body was discovered in the woods. According to the prosecution, Leavell Keaton was envious of Natalie and reacted angrily when Natalie was referred to as a princess by friends and relatives. When Chase asked about his little sister, he was murdered as well. Tierra Capri Gobble, 17 years on death row in the state of Alabama. Gobble was found guilty of the death of her 4-month-old son, Phoenix Cody Parrish. Tierra Capri Gobble's first 3 children were allegedly taken from her by child services due to abuse, and her 4th kid was delivered to family members with the direction that Gobble be denied access. Well, the parents gave Tierra permission to take the baby, and when the child was just 4 months old, she beat him to death. Phoenix was brought to the emergency room of the Southeast Alabama Medical Center in Dothan on December 15, 2004. He had no pulse and was not breathing. When efforts to revive him were in vain, he was declared dead not long after being taken to the hospital. Phoenix's skull had been broken, and the autopsy revealed that he had died as a result of blood head trauma. He also had several bruises on his face, head, neck, and chest, fractured ribs, a broken arm, fractures in both wrists, and a rip in the inside of his lips, consistent with a bottle being rammed into his mouth. The baby died because his mother could not get him to sleep and she lost her temper. Lisa Leanne Graham, 7 years on death row in the state of Alabama. Lisa Graham was found guilty of hiring a family friend to kill her daughter Stephanie Shea Graham, who was 21 years old. According to the prosecution, Graham detested her daughter because she was a addict, a stripper, and likely a prostitute, and had left college. The fact that Shea and her husband often sided with the same position in disputes, which was tearing their marriage apart, led Graham to suspect that the two were having an affair. Stephanie was also charged with aggravated assault in connection with a drive-by shooting in 2007, and Graham was concerned that she might leave the country and avoid having to post a $100,000 bond. Graham contacted Walton, who is currently serving a life sentence after confessing to the murder, on July 7th and gave him her weapon. Shea was found by Walton at a gas station with some companions. Under the guise of providing her a ride out of state, he convinced her to get into his truck. After that, he took Shea to a rural road off of Highway 165, where she exited the vehicle to use the restroom. She was kneeling next to the truck when Walton pulled out a 9mm pistol and fired 6 shots, twice striking her in the head, leaving her body covered in bullets with her clothes still around her ankle. Christy Michelle Scott, 14 years on death row in the state of Alabama. Scott allegedly set her house on fire, killing her son, an autistic 6 years old, according to court records. Fire investigators concluded that her children's bedroom was where the deadly fire started. Scott may have been attempting to make a claim under the insurance coverage. The Scott home was set on fire in the early hours of August 16, 2008, and Mason perished as a result of this fire. He died from smoke in his airway and thermal burns, according to a pathologist with the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences named Dr. Emily Ward. Christy Michelle Scott and her 4-year-old son Noah were sleeping in Jeremy Scott's room. He is the husband of Christy, and he had been away out of town for a few weeks. Mason was sleeping alone in the boys' bedroom. Socorro Caro, 20 years on death row in the state of California. Joey, 11 years old, Michael, 8 years old, and Christopher, 5 years old, were shot dead at their Camarillo home. The author of the crimes was none other than their mother, Socorro Caro, who felt like this was a good way to get revenge on her husband who was planning to leave her. Her 1-year-old fourth child was uninjured. Caro also shot herself in the head, but she made a full recovery. During her trial, evidence was presented that her husband wanted a divorce because she was the abuser in their relationship, often turning to violence when arguing. She said she did not remember absolutely anything from the night of the crimes, which could be true considering she had brain surgery after the incident. She also tried to say that her husband was the one who committed the murders, but she could not prove this in court and later pled guilty by reasons of insanity. Susan Eubanks, 26 years on death row in the state of California. Eubanks killed her 4 sons, Brandon, 14 years old, Austin, 7 years old, Brigham, 6 years old, and Matthew, 4 years old, on October 26, 1999. All of the boys were shot in the head, and she then shot herself in the stomach but survived. At the time of the crimes, Eubanks' 5-year-old nephew was also in the house, but he was discovered uninjured. The prosecution claimed that Eubanks had killed her sons out of pure rage. This rage was supposedly a reaction to her resentment at their fathers and her boyfriend for choosing to break up with her. It was alleged that she wanted the dads to understand the sorrow of losing someone they had loved, and that she felt the urge to seek some kind of retribution for the failed relationships. The defense argued that the killings happened as a result of the defendant blacking out, and that because of this weakened mental state, she was not in control of her conduct. It was said that she turned into a robot and did what she believed would make her anguish go away after spending the day drinking, using prescription medicines, and dealing with recent domestic conflict and past heartbreaks. Before we go to the next one, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. It helps me very much in the YouTube algorithm. Belinda Magana, 8 years on death row in the state of California. Magana and her boyfriend Naresh Nareen were charged for the death of her toddler son Malaki, who was scalded and then beaten for days before passing away from his injuries. As the pair was afraid of getting in trouble, they decided not to call the authorities, and instead Magana applied ointment. Because this did not help, the little boy was constantly crying and complaining, and both Magana and her partner hit the child multiple times for being so noisy. Magana claimed that the accident occurred when she and her other 4-year-old son were at the grocery store. Naresh, however, tried to blame the 4-year-old for turning on the heated water. According to experts, Malaki's death was caused by complications from the searing burn wounds as well as a blunt force trauma to the head. After driving to a party in Apple Valley, Belinda and Nareen buried the body the following day in San Bernardino County close to Little Creek. Angelina Rodriguez, 19 years on death row in the state of California. Rodriguez was found guilty of killing her spouse with Gatorade laced with antifreeze. She apparently tried to kill him numerous times before with no result. A $250,000 life insurance coverage served as her motivation. She was found guilty of threatening a witness who she had told about her murderous plans for Frank. Rodriguez attempted to murder her husband only 3 months after they got married. The first time, according to the authorities, she fed him oleander plants that were poisonous, causing him to become ill. After that, she allegedly opened the gas cap on the dryer before departing to go see a friend in San Luis Obispo. Rodriguez ended up adding doses of green antifreeze to her husband's Gatorade. She called her insurance company a few hours after her husband passed away, but the representative informed her that she wouldn't get any money until the coroner determined the cause of death. Prosecutors said that she later called an investigator and claimed to have received an anonymous call claiming that her spouse had been poisoned with antifreeze. According to phone records, she never received such a call. Now, Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney Doug Sortino had the best take on this situation. Her relentlessness in her effort to pursue her goals was matched only by her stupidity. Additionally, the prosecution produced evidence that Rodriguez killed her child in 1993 by smashing a pacifier and forcing a piece of it down the infant's throat before filing a lawsuit against the pacifier's maker. She got over $400,000 compensation out of that trial. Rodriguez argued before the judge that she had not committed the crime and that Frank must have drunk the antifreeze on his own, but the defense attorney told the press after the hearing that he couldn't come up with much of a defense on the guilt-innocence question. Manling Tsang Williams, 11 years on death row in the state of California. In 2007, Williams was found guilty of killing her husband in their Rowland Heights home and suffocating her 2 small children with a pillow. Her motivation was a narcissistic, selfish, and juvenile desire to begin a new life with another guy away from the constraints of family life, according to the records. Manling Williams had reconnected with an old buddy on the internet in the months prior to the killings and had started dating him. The judge emphasized that if Manling Williams had chosen to just abandon the children, there were many family members who would have been able to take care of them. Neil Williams, her husband, was stabbed and sliced more than 97 times in the attack after Devon and Ian were strangled in their bunk bed, according to authorities. She mercilessly, brutally, and ruthlessly attacked her husband with a katana sword, they claimed. The court remarked that Neil begged for help in his closing moments. She attacked her spouse while wearing latex gloves. According to testimony, it takes 5 to 10 minutes for someone to suffocate to death. Therefore, Manling Williams had at least 5 minutes to think through what she was doing before killing her other kid the same way. The court claimed that after the killings, Manling Williams wrote a note saying that Neil Williams had killed the kids and himself. She threw away bloody garments and then went back home before yelling to the neighbors that someone had slain her family. Detectives interviewed her for hours after the deaths were found, while she pretended to be distraught, sorrowful, and confused. Tiffany Moss, 4 years on death row in the state of Georgia. In 2019, Moss was found guilty of starving and torturing to death her 10-year-old stepdaughter, Emani Moss, in 2013. Emani was violently abused by Moss for several years before her demise. She was starved by Moss starting 2013. Emani's absentee father did nothing to halt the abuse. She passed away on October 28, 2013 from malnutrition. At the time of her death, she weighed 32 pounds, which is around 15 kilograms, and this is the weight of a typical toddler. Robin Lee Rowe, 29 years on death row in the state of Idaho. Rowe killed her husband and 2 children when she set fire to their Ada County house. She is the only female on death row in Idaho. The killings happened on February 10, 1992, when a fire broke out on the first floor of the apartment where Rowe's husband, from which she was separated, and her 2 kids were residing. Her husband Randy and children Joshua, 10 years old, and Tabitha, 8 years old, were discovered dead when emergency personnel arrived at the scene of the burning building. Carbon monoxide poisoning caused the deaths of the 3 people. Fire investigators came to the conclusion that the smoke alarm had been switched off and that a liquid accelerant had been utilized to start the fire. Rowe was the primary suspect. There were many warning signs that pointed to Robin Rowe as the major suspect. One of Robin Rowe's 2 additional children reportedly passed away from sudden infant death syndrome. The other, a toddler boy, perished in a mystery fire in California. She and her son Keith were residing in a California cottage back in 1980. Her child was killed in a fire that started when his blankets caught fire from a portable heater. Rowe received $28,000 on the life insurance coverage after the boy passed away. Detectives discovered that Rowe had purchased over $250,000 worth of life insurance policy on her husband and kids. Michelle Sue Tharp, 22 years on death row in the state of Pennsylvania. Tharp was convicted for the murder of her 7-year-old daughter. After being starved for an extensive period of time, Tosha was found dead in her bed by her mother. Tharp admitted during her testimony that she hesitated to seek help out of fear that social services would remove her other children. Instead, she and her boyfriend, Douglas Bittinger, drove Tosha's body through a convoluted, lengthy list of errands in his car before discarding it in the woods, draped in a sheet and packed in trash bags. Investigators soon discovered that Tosha's body had been hidden in a bush in the West Virginia woods by Tharp and her partner, who had made up a tale that the girl had become lost in the mall. On April 19, 1998, police detained Tharp a day after she reported Tosha missing from a Steubenville, Ohio mall. Tosha was born prematurely and was suffering from a wide range of conditions, including genetic anomalies, issues with her lungs, blood, glands, nervous system, and also digestive system. When she was born, she weighed 2 pounds 5 ounces, and when she passed away, she weighed less than 12 pounds. She had gone days without eating, according to an autopsy. According to witnesses, Tharp deprived Tasha of food for days or more at a time. They said that she kept her daughter in her room at night in order to stop her from rummaging around the kitchen for any crumbs that might be accessible. Tasha would eat from the trash can and from the pet food bowl. Additionally, they claimed that she treated her son and 2 other girls way better than she treated Tasha. Melissa Lucio, 14 years on death row in the state of Texas. Lucio has been convicted for the murder of her 2-year-old daughter Mariah. She claimed that the toddler had fallen down the stairs, but the medical exam also showed she had many bruises. She was missing hair that had been pulled by the roots. She had a broken arm that was in the early stages of healing, and there were bite marks on her back as well. While the fall supposedly happened 2 days prior, the paramedics were only called when Mariah was found not breathing and unresponsive. The autopsy also revealed she had bruising of the spinal cord, the lungs, and the kidneys. Lucio had 9 other children, and she was expecting twins at the time of her conviction, babies that she had to give up for adoption after being incarcerated. Her other living children backed up the false story and said their mother was not the person she was portrayed to be. One of her boys said he actually saw Mariah fall down the stairs, and he was adamant about the fact that nobody told him that she fell. He saw that with his own eyes. Melissa Lucio is part of the Innocence Project. The Innocence Project is an organization that helps investigate and re-examine evidence from trials that have a chance to have ended with a wrongful conviction. For example, they helped free Malcolm Alexander, who spent 38 years in a prison for a crime he did not commit. Darlie Routier, 26 years on death row in the state of Texas. Rottier was found guilty of stabbing and murdering her 2 young sons, Damon, 5 years old, and Devon, 6 years old. Devon and Damon were killed by a huge kitchen knife, and Routier herself was stabbed in the arm and throat. Routier reported to the police that an unidentified intruder was responsible for the incident. The defense argued that there was no reason Routier would have killed her children, and that the case lacked a motive, a confession, or any witnesses. During the trial, the prosecution claimed that Routier's injuries were self-inflicted, that the crime scene had been staged, and that she killed her sons due to the family's financial difficulties. There are DNA tests pending results, as Routier has always maintained her innocence. Patricia Blackman, 20 years on death row in the state of Alabama. Blackman was found guilty of her adopted daughter's death. Dominiqua Bryant was just 2 years old. Patricia Blackman called emergency 911 on May 29, 1999 to request paramedics be sent to her trailer in Dothan. She reported that her child was not breathing to the 911 operator. Eddie Smith, a paramedic in Dothan, testified that when he got to Patricia Blackman's mobile home at around 9:30 p.m., he saw Dominiqua unresponsive and lying on the floor of the main bedroom. She was only wearing a diaper and blood-soaked socks. Her chest was covered in blood and she had a hematoma on her forehead. She was taken to Flowers Hospital emergency room after the paramedics tried to revive her. According to the evidence, Patricia adopted Dominiqua about 9 months prior to her death. The father-in-law of Blackman, Wayne Johnson, testified that he saw Dominiqua playing and acting normally the night of her murder. He claimed that the little girl and Patricia left his home at around 8 p.m. Many objects found in Patricia Blackman's mobile home were covered in blood. A bloodstain was found on a broken pool cue. They also found a child's t-shirt, a pink flat bed sheet, a comforter, and 2 napkins, according to the forensic testing.